Good afternoon, folks. This is John Rust broadcasting across central Indiana on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial. In this studio today, we have a very special guest, someone who has worked her entire life to literally feed both America and the world billions and billions of eggs. A true pioneer in egg farming, a fifth-generation Hoosier farmer, my mother, Lois Rust. Mom is celebrating her 91st year. Welcome to the show, Mom. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Mom grew up in the late 1930s through World War II. She was a very young girl in the late 1930s, but well remembers the war years of World War II. So, Mom, in fact, you grew up very close to Freeman Airfield near Seymour, Indiana. This was a new World War II airfield constructed very quickly to help America train fighter pilots to win the war, both against the Germans and the Japanese.
Yes, day and night, nonstop.
I imagine that was pretty loud, wasn't it?
Oh, it shook the house every time they flew over.
Did you ever get to see any of the fighter pilots around town?
Oh, yes, we saw them in church. We saw them if we would be in town. Anyway, I even had a neighbor girl that married a fighter pilot.
Well, you were doing your patriotic duty. You know, everyone in the community was pulling together because this was a very, very serious war. Our future was at stake.
Oh, definitely.
So during World War II, Mom, do you remember the hardships that everyone had to go through? For instance, the food rationing.
Everything was rationed.
Of course, growing up on a farm, you had your own fresh milk, meat, and vegetables. Did you have a large garden?
We had 3 gardens. One was for strawberries and potatoes. One was for blackberries, raspberries, cucumbers, cantaloupe, watermelon, and one was for carrots, green beans, peas, cabbage, onions, all of that.
So that farm where you grew up was just a few miles west of Seymour, Indiana. That farm is located on US 50, which runs all the way from Washington, D.C. to Sacramento, California. And right across from US 50 was the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad main line between Cincinnati, Ohio and St. Louis, Missouri. So, on the B&O Railroad, you would get to ride the train from time to time to go visit family in Kansas, didn't you? Back then, you couldn't easily just go drive long distances.
In World War II, when there was tire rationing, gas rationing, we had to take the train to go to Kansas to visit my grandparents.
So is there anything special you remember about those train rides?
The trains from Seymour to St. Louis were older and bumpier. We about got thrown all out of our seats every time they started or stopped.
So, Mom, when you got on those trains, did you all get on at Brownstown or in Seymour?
Seymour at 2 o'clock in the morning.
So then when you got to St. Louis, you would get on the Missouri Pacific Railroad, correct?
Yes, and it was practically a brand new diesel spectacular train.
Yes.
At St. Louis, there were crowds of people to get on the train. At Fort Leavenworth, a lot of soldiers got on to go there. One time we were traveling with my aunt and she got on the train. We couldn't find her. We got to the door to get on and the conductor said, "No, you can't come. The train's too full. The aisles are full of people." And my mother said, we're traveling with my sister and she's already on the train. And he let us on. We went through 5 cars looking for my aunt, and then in the 6th car I heard my mother's name called real loud, and there was my aunt with her legs across 2 seats saved for us.
So all's well that ends well.
Yes.
So this was during World War II, so I imagine there had to be a lot of soldiers on that train.
Oh, and we got to visit with a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, they were from farm backgrounds, just like us.
Yep.
And we had a lot of good conversations.
So this was an ultra serious time, as these soldiers were possibly on leave, going home to see their families, coming home from the front, or getting shipped out to face battle. Again, a ultra serious time in our nation's history.
Oh, it was a very tough time. And it seemed like everyone was together in purpose to win the war. And a lot of the farmers were drafted, and so some were not drafted because they were so necessary to keep on producing food for our country.
So when the war was over, Mom, do you remember the day it ended?
I remember when the war in Europe ended, I was out on the swing under our maple tree in the yard, and I heard the church bells ring and the factory whistles blowing.
And so you knew that was
And that was the end of World War II in Europe.
I bet
I can still hear it, and how the world looked that morning.
And it was a world of hope and promise. We had beat an evil enemy that would have taken over the world, but for the Americans in World War II, it was an extremely deadly war. Everyone knew someone who died for our freedoms we have today.
Whenever there are dictators in the world, we have to understand all they are interested in is power and conquest. Right. And ruling the world. Well, you can't reason with a dictator.
Well, you can't appease a dictator. Britain found that out, and it took Winston Churchill to save Britain. You just can't buy off a dictator. Obama tried that in Iran, and it didn't work out. Obama literally sent pallets of cash, millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, to buy the Iranians off. But in the end, that was money just literally thrown out of the end of the airplane. It took force to end their nuclear program. But back on farming, so during World War II, while you were farming with mules, not gasoline-powered tractors.
Oh, yes. Anyway, I even drove a team of mules to cut hay and also to steer with them the hay wagon as we put the hay on the wagon.
And now, folks in the audience, other farmers had tractors back then, but my grandfather was very frugal and very stubborn. It's probably why he farmed with mules and horses until the early 1950s. I would say he was probably one of the very last farmers in Jackson County to have our family farm strictly with horses and mules.
I would say he was among the last.
So you were talking about working with mules all by yourself. How did you actually guide the mules?
We had to say, if we wanted them to go forward, we said, get up, get up. And if we wanted them to stop, we said, whoa, whoa.
So when you were working with the mules, they sort of knew what they were expected to do, right?
Yes, it's amazing. When we got to a corner of the field, I really didn't have to steer them to make the turn. They just sort of followed the rim of the field.
So after you worked in the field all day, that would last all day long, right?
Well, we worked till it was time to milk cows.
So even after working all day, there was still more work to do. So I know you had quite a few milk cows, but you told me once they had names. What were the names?
We had Hootapole, Bess, Fairy, Elf, Sylvia, Dumbbell.
Now, Dumbbells, that's an interesting name. What's the story behind that?
She was always wanting to kick my dad, and that's why she got that name, because she wouldn't stop.
So how long did you keep these milk cows?
Some of them we kept for 20 years.
And I know our family sold milk to the local dairy Thompson's Dairy in Seymour, which ran home delivery milk trucks throughout Jackson County. I myself can remember just barely the milk truck coming to our house and the special milk cooler we had in back that the milkman would load with that amazingly delicious local fresh milk every week. Back then, it was just a different era. Your circle of friends who was in bike riding distance, and who you went to church with.
And we were very close. You know, we had a threshing ring. We would go from farm to farm, a day or two at each one, and that would take about a week.
Well, you worked with your neighbors to get the crops in. It was a neighborhood effort.
Before the grain spoiled.
Well, and that was just how every farming community in the United States was. And this was during World War II. Everyone was pitching in together to make sure everyone got fed. The soldiers on the front line and all Americans at home working together to win the war that people today have a hard time imagining how hard it was and what the ramifications were had we lost. Freedom would have been lost. We just can't imagine that today. It was a different world, and back then it was literally all hands on deck.
Well, we were attacked by both.
Right.
And that was completely unfair.
Yes, and during that time, the level of debt taken on by the United States government to fight this war was at a record amount as the percentage of the United States economy. We were at war. It's hard to grasp today, but over 16 million Americans served in the armed forces during World War II. Everyone knew many, many people who were fighting. It was make or break for the USA. Folks, we're running out of time in this segment, but when we come back, we're going to get right back into the interview with Lois Rust and how Roseacre Farms got started. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show on Freedom 95. Welcome back to the show, folks. This is John Rust on the Radio on Freedom 95, 950 AM and 95.9 FM, broadcasting all across central Indiana for all freedom-loving Hoosiers. So I'm with my mother today, and we were talking in the first segment about her growing up during World War II and her early farming experiences. And all this helped build her character and work ethic for what was to come, helping build what is now the second largest family-owned egg farm, not just in the USA, but in the world. Roseacre Farms feeds over 20 million people every day. And Mom got her start with my father back in the early 1950s, when Dad was still selling eggs on the Indianapolis Farmers Market with the Rust family's, first 1,000 hens, which were from hen houses built all the way back in 1929. So I'm here with my mom. Mom, you were in college at Ball State studying to be a school teacher. Then you met Dad. How did you meet him?
I met him at a rural youth meeting. Jackson County had a youth group, and people that were 18 could join.
And this was for farmers, right?
For farmers' children.
And what was the name of this club?
Farmers Club. It was built by the Bush Milling Company, and it was a place where farmers could rest, because used to they were only come to Seymour to shop, and it would take all day, so they had to rest somewhere.
So what were some of the activities at the Farmers Club?
There was Farm Bureau meetings there where farmers met, and we went to those.
And your dad, my grandfather, was very active in that.
Yes. Well, they were the first that got availability out to the farmers.
Well, the Farm Bureau Co-op was extremely important for farmers to get access to tractors, to supplies. Do you remember when you first got electricity?
That was in 1937, and I can still remember we had some kind of gas lighting before. There were pipes on the ceiling, and it was so bright you could hardly look at it. I still remember the people putting in the bathroom, the truck bringing the refrigerator.
That's amazing to remember the first refrigerator received on the farm. Wow. How many chickens did we have on that farm?
We had probably about 300.
So jumping ahead a bit, my grandma, your mom, used receipts from the eggs sold from those 300 hens to pay for that Oliver Rowcrop 66 tractor to prove in U.S. federal court that she was an equal partner on the farm. That was a big deal, as up to my grandma proving she was an equal partner on the farm, widows would be taxed for the estate upon the death of her husband.
If that happened, widows were not entitled to anything.
Which led to many a farm being lost. It was absolutely wrong. And Grandma Audie stood up and said no. That wasn't right. She was stubborn too. She proved her point.
It's because she had records every day of markets, quantities.
Well, her meticulous records from the egg money and from her work on the farm, she was able to prove the point that she worked just as hard as her husband. And this was a landmark federal court case. It is a precedent decision for all farmers all across the United States, not just Indiana, that after my grandma took this case to court, now farms are safe. Farms can stay in the families that built the farm. A landmark decision for all Americans. And you know all about that with building Roseacres. So when you started out in 1953 with Dad at Roseacres selling eggs, not just from Grandpa and Grandma Rust's farm, and your parents, the Audie's chickens, but also eggs from neighbors. Dad had a route throughout Jackson County buying neighboring farmers' eggs, which you and him would wash, candle, and grade for sale. But also by then you were starting to sell to grocery stores, right?
Yes, but he was starting to deliver to stores, and every Friday morning at 2 o'clock he took a truck and went to the farmer's market, and then he would take cases and deliver them to different stores around Indianapolis. At that time there was probably a grocery store on about every other intersection in the city.
So just selling eggs wasn't the hard part, though. The hard part was actually producing the eggs. And so at this point in the 1950s, you and Dad started building first 1,000, then 2,000, then 5,000, then 10,000 hen chicken houses, expanding rapidly as the markets developed in Indianapolis. But it was always a lot of hard work, and it was always still basic animal care. Can you go into that a little bit?
We had to feed the chickens. We had to water the chickens. We had to chase them in at night. We had to watch so they wouldn't pile once they got inside. It was a lot of work.
So how this relates to modern farming and business in Indiana today, we have what's called the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which is really a slush fund for the donors of the party in power. The Indiana Economic Development Corporation is controlled by the Indiana Republican Party. Those funds are used to pick winners and losers in today's Hoosier economy. It's no longer about the markets deciding what businesses succeed. It is about government taking money from Hoosier taxpayers and giving that money to preferred corporations or businesses that are really just donors to the party in power. So I want to ask you, Mom, was there anything like that ever back in Indiana when you were getting started out?
No, never.
Well, you built Roseacres by plowing back into the farm every single penny that you earned. As a result of your farming and conservative business practices, our family was able to build something that all Hoosiers can be proud of. Farms that feed literally millions of people every year, hundreds of millions of people every year. You, of course, don't get that big without first taking care of your chickens, but most importantly, always is the people that actually feed and take care of the chickens. They are the ones making it happen. They're the ones coming in the morning at 6 a.m. and sometimes not getting home until midnight when there's a problem, making sure every hen is fed, because only a happy, well-fed chicken will lay eggs. And only a happy chicken will produce a beautiful egg, a delicious egg that, Hoosier consumers love to buy. But again, most importantly, it is our people that make it happen. Right now, Rose Acres has over 2,500 full-time employees all across the country.
We have wonderful people.
Well, in just last week's broadcast, I interviewed Gary Bradley, who drove a semi for Rose Acre Farms over 4 million miles, delivering Rose Acre Hoosier-produced farm-fresh eggs and egg products all across America. So in the 1950s, you grew very rapidly. Then by the 1960s, you started building very large farms. But in 1958, it built the first farm Dad had with 120,000 chickens called P1. P stood for Pentagon. The shape was actually a septagon, but we called it Pentagon. And then the second farm was called P2, and it started in 1962. These were very large farms with over 120,000 chickens per farm. Where were you selling this large amount of eggs at?
Anyway, the stores became chain stores, and A&P was the first big, what you would call coast-to-coast chain.
Grocery store chain.
And we sold to several cities where they had stores.
What cities were those?
Indianapolis, Louisville, Detroit, Cleveland.
Basically all over the Midwest. And these were from Pentagon 1 and 2. You know, these were the first in-line chicken houses built in the United States. By in-line, I mean the eggs were produced, washed, graded, packaged, and chilled at one location. That is how the price for eggs become such an economic marvel for Americans. When you and Dad were selling eggs on the farmer's market, he was getting 50 cents a dozen. Thanks to these new, larger inline farms, that price actually began to drop rapidly for what we received. But 50 cents a dozen in 1952 today is over $6.50 a dozen. And that's because of the nation's debt crisis devaluing the dollar so rapidly. Today we are getting around $3 a dozen for the eggs, but only in the last 8 or so years has the dollar devalued so quickly so that now when you see eggs for $3 a dozen, you know you're getting a bargain. And that's just because the American dollar has been devalued so much by these career politicians, both in the Republican and Democratic parties in Washington. You know, look at what the debt ceiling just recently, they just raised it another $5 trillion. That means long term, the dollars you have in the bank account are going to be worth less. There's no such thing as a free lunch. Everything comes at a price. You know, again, getting $3 a dozen today for eggs, that's less than half the price my father was getting when adjusted for inflation in 1952. But that is what market capitalism produces, talking about the price of eggs. That is what the free enterprise system is about. And no Indiana Economic Development Corporation was needed to make that happen, so that eggs today can be such an economic blessing. And that's what the market capitalism produces. It is what the free enterprise system is all about. And no Indiana Economic Development Corporation was needed to make that happen. So folks, we're running out of time on this segment, but we'll be right back with more on the John Rust Show on Freedom 95. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on Rust on the Radio, the John Rust Show here on Indiana's Freedom 95, broadcasting on 950 AM and 95.9 FM all across central Indiana. Also available on podcast on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, Amazon, and iHeartRadio podcast. I'm here with my mom, Lois Rust, co-founder of Rose Acre Farms, who with my family helped build the largest family-owned egg farm, not only in Indiana, but throughout the world. We feed over 20 million people eggs every day, 365 days a year. Chickens don't take a holiday, so we don't either. In the previous segment, I was talking to Mom about the efficiencies of these modern large farms and how they have kept the price of eggs to less than half of what they were selling for in 1952 when you adjust it for inflation. When my dad was selling eggs on the Indianapolis farmers market, he was getting 50 cents a dozen. Adjusted for inflation today, that would be over $6.50 a dozen wholesale. So probably $7 or $8 retail when you take into account just what these career politicians like Jim Banks, Todd Young, and Aaron Houchin have done by expanding government debt so massively. But us farmers are doing our part to keep eggs inexpensive compared to other forms of protein. Eggs are a bargain. And why is that? It's because we work so hard to keep our farms efficient.
Well, you have to be efficient to be a farmer.
Well, and that's just it. You have to be efficient because you may make money one year, but as a farmer, you will more than likely give all that back the next 3 years. That's just how commodity pricing works.
And if there's crop failures, that makes feed more expensive. And we have to take that into consideration. You can't predict the weather, and you can't predict the markets.
Well, you just never know what will happen. For instance, in the 1980s, we had the federal government saying eggs were bad for you by all these alleged cholesterol studies, but we found out since then that dietary cholesterol has little or no effect on blood level cholesterol.
Yes, they found out that it was a different type of cholesterol.
So despite these challenges from the government, we continued to build new farms, including Quart Acres, which was quite a fight to get built. But it used a lot of corn and has been a boon for Jackson County farmers.
Well, each hen eats 1 bushel of corn a year.
So as we grew our farms, including Gin Acres, Quart Acres, Newton County Egg Farm, White County Egg Farm, Pulaski County Egg Farm, and County Line Egg Farm near Frankfort, we were providing an awesome market for local grain farmers. In fact, one of the things I did early on our egg cartons was put the line on the carton that said, "These eggs are produced with locally grown grains grown by local farmers." We are so proud that our Indiana-produced eggs sold all over the world have only Hoosier grains fed to the chickens. And I remember once that a neighbor in Jackson County at church said they found Roseacre brand eggs in Hong Kong, of all places. And they were so proud that their corn was in those eggs all the way across the Pacific Ocean, helping feed a hungry world, a world away. But it was a fight to get that all done. Getting Quart Acres built specifically took a long time. We had to fight a local zoning board to put a chicken farm in a rural area.
Yes, there were zoning meetings that lasted till 2 o'clock in the morning at the courthouse.
Well, and it was a fight because people, not in my backyard, people didn't want a chicken farm in a rural area. But in the end, that is exactly what was needed to happen because these large farms are what produce eggs so efficiently.
Well, you can use efficient feeders, automatic equipment, and they were much more people friendly. The people didn't have to worry about chickens flying into them.
So when we were building Quart Acres, what were the interest rates back then while that farm was being built?
They went to 26% in 1980.
And that's what we're looking at right now again with how the federal government is just blowing out these spending levels and the massive debt. Interest rates are going to be rising. They're not going to be falling.
It was a terrible time.
Because we were suffering from inflation, right?
And that's what caused a lot of farmers to go bankrupt. It was a very difficult time for farmers in 1980s because their debt interest went far beyond anything they could pay.
And the cause of those rising interest rates was just out of control government spending. And it's the same thing we're facing today.
Well, it was a mistake to go off the gold standard. Yes, I can still remember that.
Well, and then the politicians got a hold of the dollar and started devaluing the dollar. And now it's devaluing rapidly.
I can remember there was a person, they sat in the chair in our living room and they said eggs will never be 39 cents again. And 39 cents at one time was a good price.
Yes, back when the dollar was worth something before these career politicians in Washington destroyed it. So, Mom, you yourself received an award from Kraft Foods, one of the largest corporations in the world, for being a leader in agriculture. You were recognized as one of the most important women in the agribusiness today.
It was something that I was able to do at the time.
So, folks, you can hear there that Mom is not a braggart, but she has a incredible work ethic, and that's why the industry recognized her for her massive contribution to the egg business. And part of that work ethic, she's 91 years old now. She still works 6:30 to 4:30, really 6 days a week, and on Sunday afternoons. I know she works. She goes to church on Sunday mornings early, but I know she still works on Sunday afternoons as well. You just don't give up. You are going to keep working as long as you can, aren't you?
Well, I like to. It's fun to see the markets, the production, what's going on at each of the farms.
Well, I think you're a lot like Warren Buffett. He just retired as chairman of the board, but I think, like you, he is chairman of the board emeritus at Berkshire Hathaway, and you're chairman of the board emeritus at Roseacre Farms, still attending board meetings and still helping give wisdom and experience to the younger generations who are now running the farms. And that is a massive accomplishment. That is a massive blessing. And you're still working. You know, Mom still looks at the production records for every Roseacre chicken house, you know, not just in the 48 contiguous states here, but also she watches our production records for our farm in Hawaii now. So if there's a problem in one particular chicken house, Mom will call me or Elias up and say, hey, there's something going on. What's going on there? And it's good to have her keeping us all on our toes.
And we have to watch our chickens because the weather changes. There can be power outages, disease threats.
Well, I'm talking about disease threats. You know, we have lived through that. Just earlier this year, folks, our farm at Court Acres was completely wiped out by bird flu. Every chicken had to be killed. And that was by a direct edict from the federal government, not because we wanted to, because the government made us do it. And the same thing happened at our farm at Hyde County in North Carolina. We thought for a while the Trump administration was going to allow vaccination, which Mexico vaccinates against bird flu, China vaccinates against bird flu, France vaccinates against bird flu, but the United States farmers are not allowed to because broiler producers won't let us. They want to hold foreign markets open for the meat chickens, and so unfortunately American consumers are getting the shaft on that end of the deal. You know, initially the Trump administration looked like they were changing policies and not going to force us to, number one, kill all of our chickens if the disease hit one of the farms. And number two, most importantly, they were going to allow us to vaccinate. However, unfortunately, that has recently changed, and I will be doing a full episode on that in the future. So stay tuned on that one for future broadcasts on Freedom 95 on that issue. So back on point with Mom. So Mom, I have a question. How long do you think our family has been farming? I know we are now 6th generation and now 7th generation farmers here in the state of Indiana. But how deep does our roots go back in farming, you know, to Europe where we originally came from?
Anyway, when we studied the ancestors, 1,000 years.
So that's the expertise our family has in farming. It's ingrained in us. It's in our DNA. It's what we know how to do. You know, we know that some years, like I said earlier, some years are profitable, but you're also going to face years of devastating losses just like any commodity farmer. It is no different. Farming can be extremely hard.
Well, the hardest was learning how to use the more automatic equipment. That was probably the biggest challenge in the early 70s.
And that technology only exponentially increased. You know, for instance, today everything is computer driven. The eggs are checked automatically by computers for internal shell quality, external shell quality. Everything is not touched by human hands, so that the quality of the egg going to the consumer is the best egg in recorded history. The eggs are fantastic that are going to consumers today, and they are not only wonderful to eat, they are delicious, they are nutritious. But now, more than ever, thanks to all this technology with all the computers that help package the eggs at every stage of the processing, eggs are a safe and wonderful food. So folks, we're out of time on this segment, but when we come back, we will get right back into this, and I'm going to ask Mom what her favorite type of egg is. This is John Rust on The John Rust Show on Freedom 95. Welcome back, folks. This is John Rust on Rust on the Radio, The John Rust Show on Freedom 95, broadcasting all across central Indiana on 950 AM and 95.9 FM on your radio dial. I'm here with my mom, and before the break, I announced I was going to ask her what her favorite type of egg was. So let's ask her. Mom, what is your favorite type of egg?
I like sunny side up.
I'm more of an over easy person, or I like an omelet with lots of ham and cheese in it. But they're all delicious. Eggs are just such a versatile food. You can prepare them in so many ways. But gosh, it's a whole lot of work getting the egg to the consumer. If only we could get our career politicians in Washington to show up for the job. Unfortunately, right now, Congress is on another 2-week vacation.
And
you have to have a work ethic.
And they're getting paid very well.
They get paid extremely well. So we have a lot of very lazy politicians today, but I want to ask Mom, back in history, who was your favorite president?
I liked Eisenhower because he's the one that saw to it that the interstate highway system got done in the United States. And if we would try to do that today, it would almost be impossible.
Well, he was a real general. He was a real military man, helping to win World War II, and he built the interstate highway system without any tolls. Unfortunately, the politicians today view interstates as something they can toll, not to build new interstates, but to give off more money for, their pet projects for, their donors. Look what's happening in Indiana with the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. And what's even worse, despite all these tolls that they want to bring in for every mile of interstate in the state of Indiana, we already have the 4th highest gasoline tax in the country. It is crazy. Indiana has become, the Taxachusetts of the Midwest. We have such high gas taxes, with record revenue coming in from the gasoline tax. But that's not enough for the politicians. They want more. They want more money to give to their donors. That's what's really happening behind the scenes. So other than Eisenhower, one of my favorite presidents was Ronald Reagan. What did you think of Reagan?
I thought he was a good conservative president that stood for fiscal responsibility, and he was very good internationally.
Yes, absolutely. A major breakthrough was Ronald Reagan winning the Cold War, being responsible for the fall of the Berlin Wall. He is the president who went to the Brandenburg Gates and said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." He and Margaret Thatcher were bulwarks of conservatism in the 1980s, and that is sadly what is completely missing from any politician today other than Thomas Massey in the state of Kentucky. Margaret Thatcher was extremely important for the survival and revival of Great Britain.
I think her and Churchill were some of the best prime ministers England ever had.
So, Mom, you've been around 90 years now. What words would you like to impart for future generations?
The sooner you start working, the more it exposes you to opportunities. And the longer you wait to start working, the slower you are to be opened to opportunities.
And another way of saying that is the early bird gets the worm. If you're a chicken farmer or any farmer, you get up before sunrise because it's going to be a long day, and the more you work, the more you will succeed. If you don't show up, if you're late, you shouldn't be there. You're not going to be able to take care of animals. You're not going to be able to take care of your country. It is simple as that.
Well, that's because we need people to be in the places working and watching, taking good care of your fields and your livestock. That's a wonderful feeling, to see all of it operating smoothly and correctly.
Well, we have been so blessed with so many people that have worked at Roseacre Farms for not just 20 years, but 30 years, 40 years, and even 50 years. We have an employee named Randy Wasson who started working at Gen Acres, where I grew up as a kid. I was just, 8 years old when he started. He is still working at Roseacres today. And Gary Bradley, who I just interviewed last week, he worked over 40 years for Roseacre Farms, driving over 4 million miles, delivering eggs all across the country, and then transitioning to another job at Roseacres, where he ran the front desk and was the literal eyes and ears of what was going on at the farm, because he knew it all, he experienced it all, and that is something you just don't get without taking care of the people that actually do the job, that actually take care of the chickens and help make sure all of America gets fed.
And they were all good people. They worked hard and regularly. They were always there when needed.
Well, it was hard work, and it was what Dad called, the esprit de corps, the spirit of everyone working together for a purpose. Oftentimes, it was very, very difficult. Remember, back during the blizzard years of the late 1970s. You remember that.
Yeah, we had to work even when there were blizzards. Anyway, and storms, tornadoes. I rode on a tractor out in the cold air, just holding on to the seat, and they took me to a farm.
And what was the temperature?
It was below zero.
And how high were the snowdrifts?
Oh, anyway, I think some of them were 19 foot deep.
Well, back then, when we were facing 19-foot high snowdrifts, all the politicians were saying, oh, it's global freezing. We're coming up to an ice age. And so that was their reason to tax us, because the weather was getting too cold and it changed. But back on topic for then, yes, it was hard, and it was hard to get people to come in, but they did come in. And so with the folks that could make it in, and with my sisters and brothers, we all, as a family, stuck together, got the eggs gathered because we had to, Mom, didn't we?
Well, we had to get the eggs out before they froze. It was so cold.
Yes, so a big deal during the freezes was myself and my younger brother Robert, my sister Karen, and my sister Ruth Ann, we had to walk up and down the chicken houses at P1 and P2 with butane torches, keeping the water lines from freezing. So once we would walk, I think the chicken houses were 300 feet long, we would be walking, very slowly, just an inch at a time, warming that water to keep it from freezing so the chickens could keep drinking. And we did that over and over, because if chickens get cut off from water, they will quit laying eggs.
And a chicken will not lay an egg unless that egg has all the nutrients in it to grow a baby chick.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's such a healthy food.
Right. Yes, absolutely. Eggs are a perfect food. In fact, scientists use egg protein to measure the protein of all other foods and substances on the planet when determining its efficacy, its purity, for comparisons. So that is just how pure egg protein is. So the folks out there that are listening, that are dieting or just wanting to practice good health, always remember eggs have the very highest form of protein you can buy. So Mom and Dad, in the very early 1980s, started putting a Bible verse inside our family's egg cartons. That's Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Because folks, no matter what, tomorrow will be a new day. and we always have to be thankful for what we have and hold out for the promise of tomorrow. So thanks so much for listening. Mom, thank you so much, and I hope to have you back on the program next year again for your 92nd birthday.
I guess that's whatever the Lord above has decided.
Well, I am very hopeful the Lord will decide that, and so that hopefully we can have Mom back again next year for her 92nd birthday. So folks, thank you so much for listening. This is John Rust on Rust on the Radio on Freedom 95. I'll see you all again next week on the radio.